Hi, I'm Mira Gosalia, your host today. Welcome to Seamless Insights, the podcast, where we're going to give you the inside scoop into what it's really like working with our MedPace teams. This episode is going to highlight our clinical research associates and what makes them exceptional partners. Today's guest is an expert in clinical trial conduct with over 28 years of experience in the pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and device industry. President of independent clinical research site Remington Davis, please welcome Hamish Baird.
Thank you, Mira. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here and joining us today and being here to share your insights about your interactions with MedPace CRAs. It's so great to have you. Let's start off with some background information. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your work with MedPace CRAs?
Absolutely. Like you said, I started, actually now it's 29 years ago that I
Very
started.
cool.
I started as a study coordinator at Remington Davis. I did that for about 6 or 7 years before moving into project management. And then I worked my way through business development, and now I'm president of the company. So obviously over those years, I've worked with a lot of monitoring groups, and MedPace has been by far one of the more exceptional groups that we've worked with. We've done in the last 3 years, I believe it's now 9 studies with 2 more coming. So that would put 11 studies over the past 3 years. So we have a lot of exposure to your CRAs and monitoring groups. And one of the things that we really enjoy is the consistency, the professionalism, and the collaborative nature that they bring to the research studies.
Very good. It's so great to hear that we've worked on a lot of trials together. You have some more upcoming, so very exciting to continue the collaboration. Today, we really want to share insights into what it's really like working with MedPace. So can you go into what differentiates MedPace monitoring services?
Well, like I said, I think this all starts with communication. The CRAs at MedPace are extremely responsive. We have no problem getting hold of them. They tend to be very knowledgeable of not just the protocol itself and the nuts and bolts, but actually the medicine and the objectives behind the protocol. And that helps to guide us and our staff to make sure that we're delivering consistent, high-quality data. It's very evident to me that many of your CRAs have some either they have some direct site experience. Perhaps they worked at a site or were a study coordinator at some point, or they have a really great training program here, which I think might be both actually, because the CRAs tend to come and they really understand what our job is and what we're trying to deliver. Research sites tend to be quite insular. Like we don't talk to each other that much. And so sometimes we miss out on some of what the best practices are, or perhaps some good ideas or strategies for patient recruitment. And because the MedPace CRAs are so collaborative, they tend to share that information more. The newsletters are more robust. The monitoring report letters that we get are complete and they're accurate, and they give us real actionable feedback so that we can improve our services. And I think that really helps to create a seamless experience for both the site, the sponsor, and even the patient, because the patient gets the consistency. We're telling them the same things each time.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for sharing those examples. And it's great to hear that, maybe some of the training that's happening in-house is being replicated out in the field. And perhaps the CRAs are identifying some of the root causes that might be coming from some of the queries.
Absolutely.
So updating, original source document templates, things like that, hopefully help in the overall, conduct of the trial as well. And as you mentioned, trickles through from PI to the site to the patients as well. So that's great to hear.
It really does, because that allows us to just focus on the medicine and the recruiting and making sure that our data is clean. We really feel like we have a partner, and I think that's one thing that has been really great about MedPace is that for example, we have one of our very favorite monitors is Amanda, because I talk about her all the time. But she was on like 5 studies in a row for us over the number of years, and so that level of consistency, you just don't get that at other CROs. And I think that there's so much to be said about that, because you develop a relationship, and there's really a collaboration and a trust that goes on there, so that that when they bring something to your attention, they're not just being nitpicky or maybe interpreting regulations a little bit differently. Like it really creates a collaborative environment so that we can move things forward in a really great and a really the most compliant and great manner. So
Yeah,
it's really
that's
been
great.
great.
Thank you. And that's great to hear. And it sounds like it's a productive relationship. I think as a CRA, one of the items that I would find could be barriers at sites that maybe didn't understand the collaborative nature of our relationship.
Mhm.
It felt more that, we were on different teams and it would cause a little bit of friction, helping them understand why these queries are being issued. But in the collaborative nature of, the site to CRA relationship, things do get done. And it's nice to hear that, you're feeling that productive relationship with our MedPay CRAs.
Yeah, we really are.
Good. And so obviously you've had several experiences working closely with our CRAs, and you've touched on what it's like working with them. Are there any specific qualities or skills that kind of stand out to you that MedPay CRAs have?
There's definitely a very high level of professionalism,
Hmm.
but they're also very personable. I think
Hmm.
that they have a good understanding of the pressures that we're under as a site and as study
Sure.
coordinators. Everything is timed. And protocols can have very narrow entry criteria and very strict procedural requirements, and
Right.
so. When you have somebody that is professional and extremely knowledgeable about the protocol and the science behind it and the reasons why we're doing it that way, they can explain that to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great to
Mhm.
hear. That's a great example. And it sounds like from your experience, CRAs have played a large role just in the process as a whole. How do you think MedPay CRAs contribute to the overall trial success?
So I think that I keep alluding to the fact that they're better trained and that they have more
Hmm.
information and knowledge about the study and the protocol. And I think that is really where it shows. We have had monitors come in, and this was for actually a cardiomyopathy study.
Hmm.
And for the first part of the study, we enrolled 72 patients. So there was an enormous amount of data, and it
Yeah.
all happened very quickly. And she came in and noticed that we were entering data into the EDC system in a manner that was causing queries, and it
Mm,
could have really ballooned on us, and we could have had hundreds of queries.
yeah.
And she came in, and because she had some training in the EDC and understood what it was that the sponsor and the EDC system was looking for, the data management, she was able to really guide us and make sure that we weren't making that same mistake. And so there's something that's sort of like source doc related and
Right.
like sort of that data entry related. But then there's also we had an erosive esophagitis study where patients didn't qualify unless they had an upper endoscopy,
Hmm.
and we had a higher screen fail rate than most of the other sites, and we were scratching our head thinking, what are we doing here? That like are we being too restrictive or not restrictive enough when we're doing our pre-screening? Like, and I said before that sometimes sites are insular and they don't really have an idea of what some of
Right.
the best practices are for especially like recruitment and that type
Hmm.
of thing. And she was able to bring us some real world experience from other sites
Hmm.
and just give us some guidance on that. And it really, we were able to change our phone screener a little bit and evaluate symptoms that would most likely make them qualify. So that was extremely helpful for us and we did reduce the screen fail rate by about 30%. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
significant.
Yeah, definitely. That's great to hear. And I'm hearing that, that collaborative nature it's with site and CRA, but then it's also, CRAs are learning that from other CRAs internally, potentially through their lead CRA or through the clinical trial manager, the project coordinators that are also integrating and working with the site. So learning that information and then bringing it back to their individual assigned sites seems to be helping overall as well, just to share those experiences, share lessons learned,
Yes.
pain points. If CRAs are bringing back pain points from a variety of sites, then it's coming back internally so that it can be looked at as a whole. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Studies are so complicated these days, and there's so many moving parts, and you have a very limited amount of time to get everything done. And so I think that, having a partner
Hmm.
and really a teammate, I think even, it's like an extra set of hands in a way that we can bounce
Yeah.
things off of. And they're very friendly.
Hmm.
They clearly very like their jobs very much.
Hmm.
You obviously have a very good culture because pretty much all of them have come through, and there have been a lot of MedPace
Yeah.
CRAs that have come through. They all share those traits, and it's really refreshing to work with people who aren't sort of lording over you and wagging their finger, right? They're
Sure.
really getting in the weeds with us and really helping us to be successful.
That's great. And, preferred partners like yourself and like Remington Davis, we really appreciate that you're open to learning from some of those updates that can be made. So you mentioned the example of, changing up the pre-screening a little bit.
Hmm.
So we also really appreciate that in terms of, it's important for that pre-screening to come through appropriately for the protocol purposes to keep up with the enrollment goals and keep up with site goals. So listening and being able to collaborate with the CRA, I think, of course, brings overall success as well. And your willingness to kind of update, any of those changes at your site is also really appreciated and welcomed. So
Thank you.
thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You shared a lot of insights. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that, maybe we didn't get to in the individual questions?
I just want to compliment you all on having a really great team. And I think that, studies are so complicated now, and there's so much pressure on everybody to meet their timelines, and everything needs to be done yesterday. And so, it's much easier to work under those conditions when you're working together with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for sharing
Thank you
those
for having me.
examples.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed hearing about what makes our CRA team valuable. Our mascot Pacer and I met up to discuss some big news for our team. Based on a comprehensive vote from sites, MedPace has been honored with the Eagle Award. MedPace was awarded this trophy as the top CRO due to various operational efficiencies, communication, and support for research participants. It's thanks to our dedicated teams, like our CRAs, that we've been recognized for such an accomplishment. Don't miss our future conversations with even more stories from our teams here at MedPace who make the complex seamless.